bookish friends. You hear little tapping noises. 3-year-olds behind the camera. I've been giving some thought as to what books I want to put on my list of books to read next year. And I want to do more nonfiction than I have in the past. So I thought I'd give some nonfiction a try and see if these are ones that I want to keep a hold of and put on my list or not. So the one I know the least about is Scotch Settlement School of Henry Ford's Greenfield Village, an autobiography of a one-room school teacher. The only thing I know about this one is that it's by E. Lucille Webster, which is funny because she dedicated it to her brother Everett Webster and his wife, also named Lucille Webster. It's funny. They're spelled differently. So I'll give the preface, introduction, and first chapter a try. The first sentence is, my maternal great-grandparents were born in Scotland. So were mine. And then I have Homegrown Adventures in Parenting, Off the Beaten Path, Unschooling and Reconnecting with the Natural World by Ben Hewitt. This one's just talking about raising his sons and their education. This one has a prologue, an introduction, and then the first chapter. First sentence. The first chapter is called Moving Cows. In the early mornings of summer, before it is fully light, I walk the rutted farm road to the lower pasture, while I move the cows into a fresh paddock for the day's grazing. And finally, End of the Spear by Steve Saint. My kids and I have been listening to the Christian Heroes Then and Now series, and we listened to Betty Green, which mentions the martyrs who are reaching out to the outcasts, one of which was Nate Saint. We listened to Nate Saint's story, and now we're listening to his sister Rachel's story. And this is by Nate Saint's son, and talking about him working with the Odani, which is what the outcasts actually call themselves. So this one has a brief prologue. Oh no, it's got a longer prologue. And then chapter 1 starts in Back to the Stone Age, starts in November 1994. The head flight attendant had given us the customary briefing before takeoff. This one's probably the one I'm most committed to actually reading. And then I thought I would also share my thoughts on the first chapter of Life Giving Home. This is actually the nonfiction book that I want to get started. Next, if you watched my book haul video, you'll know that I actually want to dedicate almost a full year to reading this, because there's a part 1 and then part 2 is much longer, and there's a different chapter for each month, because the home does change and fluctuate throughout the year. Like in the summer you spend more time outside because there's more daylight. In the winter you spend more time inside because it's not light for very long. So I don't know if I will do just one check-in when I've done all of them, or if I'll do one for each book. Alright, I finished, well, sort of. I read from 2 of the books, and I decided neither one of them's for me. So the first one is the autobiography of a one-room school teacher. I think I read about 9 pages of it. It was kind of boring. It was very dry, and it read like a history book. That this happened, then this happened, then this happened, without actually much story, so I'm gonna get rid of it. And the other one was the unschooling one. I think I got about 13 pages into this one, and it was a bit more interesting, but definitely a different worldview, and I just didn't care to dedicate the time to reading this. Because there's like no faith in it, and so what's the point? It's about connecting to place and stuff, and there's no real solid foundation, I didn't think. So I'm not going to read this one either. I have started the Steve Saint one, and I have higher hopes for it. So I'll check back when I finish another one or two. Oh, I meant to film this wrap up a while ago, but we had very crazy 3 busy days in a row. So this is just going to have to be late going up, and that's okay. So I read the prologue and first chapter of End of the Spear. Really enjoyed it. This is Steve Saint's story. His father and 4 other missionaries were murdered by what they called Alkas at the time, but that's a bit of a derogatory term. They actually called themselves the Wodani. And okay, so after the missionaries are murdered, the Wodani do end up reaching out to the Quadi, which are the white men, and they do end up having missionaries go in there, and I think Steve ends up spending part of his childhood, or most of his childhood, among the Wodani. This book starts with his Aunt Rachel, who lived with them for decades, with her funeral. And I think they ask him and his family to come and teach them. So I'm definitely going to read more of this. Okay, and finally, my current nonfiction read is Life Giving Home by Sally and her daughter Sarah Clarkson, Creating a Place of Belonging and Becoming. This book talks about creating the home environment that you want to have for your family, your children, and guests, and how the atmosphere you create and the routines and traditions and celebrations that you set up can just help create the home culture you want. And this one talks about, the first few chapters talk about the importance of creating a legacy and how beauty and music and scripture really help create that. And so then part 2 is broken up by each month. So I'm going to skip down, I'm going to read chapter 4, and then I'm going to skip down and read October, and then November starts on Friday. So I'm going to read November, and then I'll read 1 chapter a month until the book is done. So out of the 4 books, I'm getting rid of 2, and I'm keeping 2. So not bad. Let me know if you have any nonfiction recommendations, because I want more for next year. And I will be back with either my wrap-up or my November TBR. So happy reading!